Welcome, owners. We've reached the Atletico Duerr press conference, and we're delighted to have you tonight, especially being our first wire of the season. We've been patiently anticipating this moment where we would be able to prove a lot of charges against our team incorrect, and honestly, we're a team that likes to show our progress on the field. We're not here to be a fake team. We're here to be legit. And I'm just glad that you could make it. I want to go over a couple things now that we're 5 games into the season. And then also, if you stay tuned, I'm actually going to go matchup by matchup and make my selections for week 6, depending on the time constraints there. But I know I'll be able to fit it in okay. So one last thing, I actually will be 25 tomorrow. So I'm going into serving the world for a quarter of a century. And nothing more exciting than that. 25. I'm going to call State Farm coming up the day after tomorrow, so get that lower car insurance. And let's go ahead and get started. So, of course, last week we defeated Use the Force Duke, and that puts us as an equalizer there at the top of Steinhauser Gym. And listen, we are incredibly surprised. A lot of the sentiment in the league was that our selection of Devonta Freeman was the wrong choice to make. And, honestly, we believed you. We didn't think that anything was necessarily wrong. And that draft pick was selected based on performance of last season. So we were honestly spooked out by that prospect that maybe Freeman would just have a terrible O-line. Maybe you all were right about that, but our gut check there is that it simply hasn't been true. The Atlanta Falcons are for real. They have an offense that's just clicking on all cylinders, and Matt Ryan has been able to adjust to this new offense, allowing Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman to not only be open in the flat, but continue to go through the center of the line. And no, we're just incredibly stoked about this. We have a consistent group of players that score at least 10 points per game. And we're averaging over 80 points for each game. So the key there is that there just hasn't been a letdown. There's not a boom and bust player on our team. Hopkins has been a little bit of a disappointment, but even with him taking his time getting ready for the season, for the rest of the season, he's still been consistent. He's a top 20 wide receiver even in a bad season. So that just shows the power of his talent there. But listen, I'm going to go down the standings and just let you know what I think. So, we're tops in Steinhauser. And then on the other side of the bracket, I think that Braden is firmly in control at 3-2 at the top of that. She wants the DAC. I think that he's got control of that division. It's going to be really hard to flip that over. But the real competition is, of course, in Steinhauser Gym, where we just had the equalizer victory against Austin, creating 2 4-win teams. And then, of course, we have Thomas, who's kind of coming out of the grave there. He's 3-2 after having kind of a rough start. And Nick Wall is well positioned. And of course, the disappointment so far has been Dylan. It's not that anything is wrong with the team, but there's always someone that picks reliable players, but for whatever reason they just don't happen to pan out to that elite level. And 0-5, that's unfortunate. It's just one of those seasons for Dylan where it might be tough to recover. And he's keeping good company there with Connor Hallbleib. And unfortunately, Clayton Usher there at 2-3 as well. Keeping up with the Joneses, it just has that. It's got that vulnerability of needing Julio and Marvin to both have a good game, or else they may not necessarily score enough points with the team there. So one of the major stats that I want the league to be aware about that we've been tracking over the last 3 weeks is actually the points for column in the standings. And so we're actually the first team to reach 500 points, Atletico Duerr. And I'm not saying we have a commanding lead. I mean, of course, Braden is at 498, and Nick Wall is at 497. But just keep in mind that my team has been leading that category for the last 3 weeks. And that's not an easy thing to do. Typically your team is going to have a letdown where you're going to give up that category. It's going to change hands. But we have been firmly in control of the last 3 games. We actually are on a 4-game winning streak after that first loss of the season, and the trajectory is certainly up from here. We don't have to depend on waiver wire acquisitions as long as nobody on that front line gets a flat tire. And no, we're incredibly satisfied. We're well in position to make the playoffs, but as you know, there's still a lot of football to be played, and the fantasy gods are unforgiving. They will take your team out of position, place you down at the bottom, and it can just be nerve-wracking to have a great start, and then you might lose 4 or 5 in a row just because something happens. So also at the top of the league, I've noticed the Lowers, they continue to show their masterful coaching, where they're obviously the team. They were the team to chase going into last week, and to actually have that equalizing win, I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of other teams to try to make that march towards the playoffs. I don't think we've ever had a team go undefeated into like week 6 or 7. Could prove me wrong on that, but typically by this time in the season, everybody's got a loss. So I'm glad I could serve Austin with the loss there and kind of open up the game a little bit. We've got 4 eligible teams that could really get into that playoff spot, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Portals is still in the game, but obviously at the bottom of a very tough division, and Shamrock Gym is wide open. I think Braden's going to clear out of there easily, just sail into that number 1 spot. But you got 3 healthy teams, and all aboard the injury train's got Le'Veon Bell back, so it's going to be tough to unseat Jacob actually, as long as Le'Veon's playing good, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's too bad that Dylan's kind of been eliminated mathematically. I just think it's impossible for him not to give away another 1 or 2 games. But at least for the rest of that division, it's wide open for that second spot. And hopefully I can hold on to a spot here in Steinhauser. That's still a lot of football to be played. So we wanted to do this kind of town hall style tonight. Don't have any sort of huge production value, but let me go ahead and see the schedule. And I'm actually going to make my selections for week 6. So bear with me. I'm going to open up the schedule here. We'll go ahead and see what we got. Okay. Nice. So yeah, the week 6 matchups. Coming up, we have 3-2 Evanescence with Thomas, and Hide Your Kids, Hide Your Wife, 3-2. Important matchup in Steinhauser. This is a defining matchup. Whoever wins this is going to be in the driver's seat to make the best claim at the second spot. And looking at the selections, I think that Nick is going to go ahead and win this matchup. Steelers are rolling. I think Big Ben is an excellent start, and of course David Johnson just had a career day against San Francisco. That's a 29-point swing versus Jonathan Stewart. Carolina looks like shit right now. I don't think I could trust them, and I'm actually going to go ahead and I was thinking about dropping Gano just because they're looking so bad, but of course Cam Newton's going to come back. On the support there, I think Thomas definitely is winning the wide receiver category with A.J. Green and Hearns, but at the same time, Brady is back, and Nick's got Edelman and Gronkowski, and I just don't think that Thomas can overcome that firepower with Carlos Hyde at the flex for Nick. Theo Riddick is a great flex, though. I mean, he's been impressive even in standard as of last week against Philadelphia, but he's really dependent on touchdowns. So Hyde is going to get his definite 20 carries per game. That's going to be tough to swing. And yeah, I definitely have Nick in this matchup. Mainly the Big Ben factor. David Johnson is on the up and up, and Gronk and Edelman with Tom Brady. Hopefully he can keep it close. I think that this might be a 10 or a 15-point win for Nick. And we'll go ahead and go to the next matchup. All right, so we've got Injury Train versus Tony Ninja Bortles, and this is a good matchup too. They both have equal records, 2-3, and also they're kind of in opposing gyms, but both of them really desperately need a win to stay on pace with the top of the pack. So I'd like to see who wins this one. Looking at the line, Russell Wilson against Atlanta, and then Stafford versus the Rams. Stafford is hot right now. He had a great game against Philly. I'm going to go ahead and take Stafford, even though the projected shows Russell Wilson having a better day. Um, Jacobs got much better running backs. I mean, Forte and McCoy, and then Tony's dependent on Ryan Matthews and Jamal Charles coming out off the injury there to be fresh. So I think Jacobs good there. Um, Wide receivers, Jacob actually has a really hot Sammy Coates. Who would have thought that? So starting Sammy Coates, he had 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that's great. And Kelvin Benjamin, of course, is a little bit downgraded with Derek Anderson at quarterback, but perhaps Cam Newton can reassume his role. At flex, of course, no contest. That could be a 10-point swing for Jacob with Emmanuel Sanders versus Le'Veon Bell. In this matchup, I think it would be too hard to pick Tony there. Mainly Le'Veon at flex, and Sammy Coates is looking really great against a Miami squad that is just completely hopeless. So Ben is really targeting Coates a lot. He had 6 catches, but that might have been on like 10 or 11 attempts. He dropped about 4 or 5 passes, and 2 of those could have been touchdowns. So we've got Jacob Purdy rolling in this game. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next matchup. Okay, so the next matchup is keeping up with the Joneses versus Atletico Duerr. That'll be another important matchup. Clayton is going to have to make a score here to actually change that trajectory. Continue to go towards the top. And looking at the matchups, I just think that it's going to be hard to make a claim for Clayton. Carson Palmer is still a little bit dicey right now, but I could see him getting 15 to 20 against the Jets. That should be a solid category. And I have Carson Wentz as a great support player right now, going up against the Skins. So I think Philly could possibly get 4 touchdowns, maybe make it like 31 or 28 versus Washington. But we'll see. I like this young quarterback, and I'm going to go ahead and sit Matt Ryan versus Seattle. So I think that he'll be fine. And then on the running back side, I've got DeMarco Murray against Cleveland, which is going to be a hell of a time for the Browns. DeMarco is the number 2 rusher in the league right now. He's got 4 weeks with over 90 yards rushing, and they're just pitching him the ball. It's about 25 carries per game for DeMarco, and definitely manageable against Gurley on the other side. And then I've got Freeman and Coleman starting, so I'll just go down to the flex. I'm starting both Atlanta running backs. They tore up Denver's defense, so I'm hoping they can do the same against Seattle. And I will go ahead and concede the wide receivers. I have to kind of depend on Julio and Marvin both having a bad day. But his team is incredibly dependent on both of the Joneses. So if Julio is struggling against Seattle, and Marvin's probably going to get about 15 against Los Angeles. I've got Hop against the Colts and Fitzgerald against the Jets. So I think it's pretty even. It just depends on if Julio or Marvin have a breakout game. You can just chalk it up. Hop and Fitzgerald are going to get 10 points each, and that's kind of the strength of my team, that I can depend on that consistent draw. I'll go Jordan Reed against Zach Ertz all day, and Demarius could very well outplay Tevin. So it just depends on if Tevin's going to get his 10 or not. Is he going to eat? And then I've got the Ravens against the Giants for the defense. So that's Eli's playing horrible. And we'll see who he fields, but I think that this week I'll definitely break 100, and it's going to be reliant on whether Clayton can have Marvin Jones really show up against the Rams, I believe. So if he can get Carson and Gurley and Jones each to have a 15 to 20 point game, that's going to be what he needs. But if not, my consistency at 10 points per player is gonna win the game for sure. He's going to need a tremendous effort from Marvin and Todd Gurley. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next line. Also, I just want to let you know that Ingram's doing good too. So he's not a throwaway player by any means. The Panthers are not playing very good defense. But I'll go ahead and take Atletico Duerr, and let's move on to the next matchup. So great. This is kind of a walk-off here. We've got She Wants the Dak versus It's Miller Time. And yeah, just in comparison, I really think that Braden's got the best team in the league. So his record isn't really representative of that dominance, but he's just got some star players. And at least on the QB line, I think that Tom Brady should outscore Dak just fine. That might keep the game interesting, but when you just go down the list, it's just kind of a giveaway. Frank Gore and LeGarrette Blount versus Lamar Miller and Terrence West. You just can't get behind that. But West is looking impressive. Baltimore hasn't had a consistent runner. This is like Terrence's third team in like 2 or 3 years, so he's kind of been going around the league. But looks like he's doing good. He put up 95 yards last week and 113 against Oakland. So I'll give him the points. I mean, he's probably going to get 10 points. LeGarrette Blount is getting like all of the touchdowns at the goal line for the Patriots when they run it. So he's consistent, and Gore, kind of a push. Like Lamar hasn't really had that 10-point game for 2 weeks, but I'll go ahead and give the advantage to Braden. I think that if Blount just does his job, he's going to get at least a touchdown. And there's no guarantee that Lamar and Terrence on the other side will get one. So I think that Braden's going to win that category. Brandon Marshall and Antonio Brown versus T.Y. Hilton and Amari Cooper. T.Y. is legit. He just tore up the Bears for 171. Da Bears. And then he scored a touchdown too. He just unloaded on him. It was like 23 points. And Amari Cooper also did really good against the Chargers. So Dylan waited 4 weeks for Amari to put up a good game. Really impressive that he stuck with it and put him in the lineup. I would have been so disappointed to have that type of distribution. 7 points, 6 points, 4 points, and finally he shows up against San Diego. Maybe he can get some confidence. And Amari's going into some great matchups. It's Kansas City, Jacksonville, Tampa Bay. He should be a sure start for Dylan. But looking at the category, Brandon Marshall and Antonio Brown on the other side, I think that Dylan has that impressive line, but it's not as impressive as Braden's, unfortunately. Antonio is really worth 2 wide receivers for that potential of just popping off. He's playing the Dolphins, so he's gonna pop off on them. And then we got Marshall going up against Arizona. Maybe he won't score, but I think that he'll still get his yards. Greg Olsen versus Delaney Walker. Delaney's good. I just think that he's good against Miami. So Titans roll up against Cleveland. Delaney should eat this week. He'll get 10. And Greg Olsen against New Orleans, he could probably get 20. To be honest, he's the top target there right now. Kelvin is having trouble, so I'll give it to Greg over Delaney. And then at flex, we've got Crabtree versus James White. That's kind of a pillow fight right there. I'll give it to Crabtree. He was kind of a consistent player, really. He's got 10 each week, 26 against Baltimore. Yeah, chalk it up. He's going to be fine. And then, no worries on the bottom of the line. So I can't go against the fantasy gods on this one. My gut tells me that She Wants the Dak is going to pull this out, and I think that he's going to get a win. I just don't think it's this week. Braden is just too powerful. The team is just too well put together. And I'd like to see Terrence West do well. I'd like to see Lamar Miller do well. But no, in comparison, it's got to be Braden. I'll go with him for 4-2, and Dylan falls to 0-6. And our final matchup, this is kind of a compelling one. We've got Works on Monday Mornings versus Use the Force Duke. We got it's 2-3 and 4-1. So I think that Austin should be able to step in here and make it 2-4 for Connor. So there's not much of an argument that I can make. I've got Eli Manning in one of my other leagues, and he's just been such a disappointment. He's Connor should really just drop him to the waiver, not start him. He's got Zeke, which is his best player. I mean, Zeke is like the guy on his team, but when you really look at it, it's like you got to go all the way down to Martellus Bennett to really be impressed with any of the players. And it's just poor management. There's some players available that were there on the waiver, like Alan Hearns, Anua was there, and they're both better than Golden Tate. So I'm just going to have to chalk that up as coaching. Like I said, on the waiver, Alan Hearns was there, Anua was there, and these are better players. So you have to keep your eyes open when you're struggling, and you got to strike while the iron is hot. You have to grab those players, and that's the strategy you have to have if you're not succeeding. You got to pick up those players that are available. So I'm taking Aaron Rodgers over Eli Manning. The Pack are probably going to tear up the Dallas defense. Jordan Howard, what an impressive season! He's just getting started with the Bears, and he's got two great weeks in a row: 118 yards, 111. Give this guy the ball, man! Like he's making Forte look like a piece of junk. I mean, Howard is the man in Chicago, and hopefully C.J. Anderson can kind of wake up and snap out of it. Denver's just been struggling. I think with this new quarterback, they're maybe a little bit flustered. But Anderson is talent. He's a good player, and I think Austin knows that. So tough defenses that they were playing towards the start too. That's not true, but he struggled against Cincinnati and Atlanta. So that may be a bit concerning. But he's going into San Diego. I think he should be fine. Houston's probably going to be really tough for them, but then he plays San Diego again, Oakland, and New Orleans. So I like Anderson's trajectory. So we got Golden Tate and Tavon Austin versus Allen Robinson and Odell Beckham. It's just that's no holds barred there. Austin's got that category. I would probably take Bennett over Jimmy Graham, but Martellus has a Tom Brady. Jimmy's got like an injured Russell Wilson. So, yeah, if I'm going to give Connor one category, it's going to be the Bennett line. And then this guy's got Jordy Nelson in his flex. So that's a walkover. He's going to outplay Devontae Parker. So we'll go ahead and put a bow on this one. I think that Austin should roll this matchup. He'll improve to 5-1 and get back on that winning streak. So, Austin is just a tough team. I happen to get him in a great week where I could score that win, but don't count him out. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with the team. It was just the fantasy gods just rewarded me instead, and that's all I got to say. I didn't have any reason to brag. I just let my team win on the field, and I've been more than satisfied proving that the Atlanta Falcons were a good draft choice with Freeman and Coleman, and one thing I'm especially proud about is that in previous seasons, I've traded away players that I've drafted, and one important thing that the commissioner said a little bit earlier this season is that you got to stick with your draft picks. If you bought them, there's no reason to sell them. You want to live and die by your choices, and I've certainly done that. I've been in a position where I could kind of buy low and sell high, but no, you look down my team. I've got some really consistent guys that they've always got a great chance of getting at least 10 points, and that's kind of the thing to keep in mind. You don't want to overcompensate and just have 2 or 3 guys that are superstars. But if you can get that whole effort of people that they're always around 10, some of them get 15 to 20 that week. That's how you win. That's a winning team. So going forward, we look forward to the second half of the season, and this is our feelings for the beginning of the year. So Rolling into Week 6, we expect to see two 5-1 teams, and then also a 4-2, and then of course we're going to see out of Hide Your Kids, Hide Your Wife, and Evanescence, who will be that third team that is, that fourth team that's 4-2, and then we'll have two teams at 5, two teams at 4, and that middle ground is going to be right there, kind of biting at our ankles there, one win behind. So that's how we think it's going to play out. Two 5-win teams. Braden wins to make it 4-2, and we think that Nick will be the other 4-2 win team. So good luck to everyone else in kind of unseating that fourth team there. Making sure that you can get into the playoffs. But at this time, our playoff predictions will be Matt, Braden, Austin, and Nick. So there's a lot of seasons to be played. People that can still make waiver acquisitions. Do what you can to trade up and add players. But thanks for tuning in tonight. We're happy to kind of add our content to this season, and expect more from us as the season goes on. If we keep winning, we're certainly going to be keeping in touch with you. So, when you play Atletico Duerr Hall, remember that you're playing a team with consistency. We don't have, the exact top players at the positions, but our collection of players within the top 10 might be good enough to pull it out this season. So be careful when you play us, and hope you have a good rest of your night. Take care, gentlemen.